Sandy and Nora's podcast.
Hey, Nora.
Hey, Sandy.
I feel like I have to play the voice note that I sent you this week for the people on the pod.
The voice note, do you want me to play it? I will play it because it is so funny.
Fucking play it. Play it.
All right, everybody. For the people, this is what it's like to get a voice text from Sandy.
I'm about to do crimes because I am behind a Waymo that cannot figure out how to make a fucking left in a left turn lane.
So how many crimes did you commit?
Oh my God. Well, the U-turn that I had to make was definitely a crime because there's no way I was supposed to be doing that. Left a bunch of cars behind me that were very annoyed as well to try to figure that out. But yeah, I continue to be, my life continues to be interrupted by bots. I'm still very annoyed by it. I took a video of one yesterday that was like stuck in a little construction crater. It was like trying to get out, kept like backing up and going forward and backing up and going forward. It eventually did it. I was surprised, but I'm sure that was very funny for the construction workers who were just like kind of leaning back and watching the stupid bot do its thing. Anyway, all of this is to say, I have like some more thoughts on this. So I wrote about it, but I don't want to like publish it anywhere. So I'm thinking, Nora, I'm just going to publish it for our patrons. I'm just going to every once in a while, for those of you who contribute to our pod, I'm going to send you some of my thoughts. I don't want to like start a blog because I don't want this to feel like work. I just like to write sometimes. And I'm going to send you some of my thoughts on that.
Ooh, I love that. And I hope that the patrons love that as well. And you should let us know if you think that's a good idea. Do let us know because feedback is always helpful.
Yes. And while we're on the subject of patrons, do you have some folks to thank?
Yes, we do. Thank you so much to everybody who shared the podcast and who liked it. Thanks to everybody who always lets us know when Canadaland pays for you to listen to this podcast. I understand that Canadaland is still advertising at Sandy and Nora, which I'll take their money.
Really?
That's great. Yeah, they sure are. I think it might be more the daily news than the main episodes, but thank you for that. We'll take some of that money. But thanks especially this week to Vivian for your financial support. We couldn't do it without you. We couldn't do it without everybody that pays or that used to pay and that can't pay anymore, that's never paid but listens. It doesn't really matter to us. We love all kinds of support. So thank you so very much. Sandy, I want to just mention, I think that your dispatches from Los Angeles really do feel like dispatches from the future. and I appreciate knowing what's coming for us.
Listen, I was in, as you know, Oakland last couple weeks ago, and I saw, okay, this was like so weird for me. I see this Tesla drive by me, and it's got no windows at the back. No windows. And it's like
classic
gold Tesla. Not like a Cybertruck, just like it looked like a Tesla 3 maybe, with no windows, all gold. And I was like, what the hell? Who can drive like that? Like, what's going on? Look it up. I was like, who can drive like that? And I'm sitting in a car, and the driver says to me, oh, that's an autonomous vehicle. I was like, what? He's like, oh yeah, they're testing the Tesla autonomous vehicles right now. And I was like, and they don't have windows? And he's like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a design choice. I was like, I feel like that's dangerous. I feel like that's dangerous. I feel like the windows are not just for the driver who's like looking out of the car. I think it's also for the people taking the car. I don't know. It was, anyway, it felt very dystopic, but I don't know. They're very different than the Waymo cars. The Waymo cars are fully outfitted with like cameras everywhere, very conspicuous, like like rotating cameras everywhere. You can't miss them. But the Tesla just looks like a Tesla. Anyway, all that's to say, I mean, frick, I sent you that voice note about a week ago, and I got stuck behind another Waymo yesterday that couldn't figure out how to make a right turn at a red light. Like, come on, man, basic shit. I just cannot believe, many of these companies, I think Waymo specifically has like put out some sort of report about how much more, how safe the autonomous vehicles are compared to human driving. And I just can't believe that, number one, because you're putting out that report. It's like proprietary. It's not like a research report done by an independent researcher. It's like from the company. But also, like, I've seen these things in action. Like, it's just, it's not possible that they're not involved in making our roads unsafe. Like, it's just not possible. Like, they are not smart vehicles. There are like cases of them like driving through crime scenes and stuff like that. It's like they're just
Sure.
like not smart vehicles. And I'm just like curious as to what they like label unsafe behavior. Like, what are they saying that the cars are not involved in? Like, does the car have to itself be involved in a crash in order to be unsafe, quote unquote, according to their study? I'm curious, but not curious enough to try to find that information. I feel like I've got the experience that I need from them.
That's right, because lived experience matters, right? And I think we should be fighting against this, like with everything we have in Canada, along with a lot of other American innovations like data centers. Have you seen the incredible protests that have been mounted in Regina against what will be or may be the biggest data center in Canada?
Oh, no. Tell me more about this. I have not seen these.
Well, folks have been aware of Bell's intention to build this data center in the outskirts of Regina. There's been a lot of research done by Simon Enoch, who's the Saskatchewan researcher for the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. And unsurprisingly, it's really mobilized average people to say that they do not want this massive, waste of land, waste of air, waste of water located anywhere, frankly. And they're trying to convince city council to not, or town council where it's going to be located, to not approve this. But it seems to me that it's the first big data center fight that I've seen in Canada. In the last week, I saw there might be some mobilizing happening in Quebec as well. But I couldn't tell if it was like, in general, we don't want data centers, or if it was mobilizing specifically against a project. But it seems to me like this is going to be a really interesting plane of action to mobilize really average people that frankly do not want such enormous amounts of waste in their communities. So solidarity with everybody out in Regina that's fighting this, and around Regina that's fighting this. And if you haven't been paying attention to it and you want to know more, just, look it up, find out what's going on, and see if there's anything that you could do to help them, or maybe learn from their struggle in case a data center gets dropped in your backyard.
Question about that. Do we know what company is using that data center?
Yeah, it's Bell Canada. So,
oh, very interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's like we're at this moment right now where I think a lot of people are trying to understand like decisions that don't seem rational or good for why are we like divesting in certain public services or certain publicly owned things. And so like the top of my mind, of course, is Canada Post, because Canada Post has been in the news like crazy this past week. But it's important to look at companies like Bell that come from having been a national public utility, which was privatized and is now, jacks everybody's cell phone prices to an extent that is like highest in the world. It helps with the affordability crisis because you can't pay for your phone and your internet very cheaply. It means that you have to give up other things to be able to pay for this stuff sometimes, even though it becomes pretty much a necessity within society. And it enriches all the people that now own Bell through the shareholders and their board of directors, their CEO, their president or chair of the board. All of them are making tons of money. And in this process, we've gone from having a public corporation that their profits would not be hoarded by a couple of people to now Bell is one of the companies, of course, that does hoard profits, that does make these enormous profits. Rogers is another good example. And Rogers, while never having been a public corporation, they actually benefited from the off sale of public assets in the aftermath of World War II. And so they were a small small radio company, and they were able to purchase at a wholesale prices public infrastructure that was built and public companies that were built during World War II, specifically that worked on radio tubes and radar and scopes, and just gave the Rogers family the lift that they needed to also solidify themselves among Canada's elites and upper classes. So, when we're looking at something like a data center now being dropped into, whether it's suburban Regina, whether that is somewhere else in Canada, we have no democratic control over these corporations. The best we can do is try to fight at the municipal council level, and municipal councilors are either good average people just wanting to do good work, or unfortunately the majority of them tend to be small business owners with concession car lots, or real estate agents, or pieces of garbage that just want to make money. Again, making money. That's anyway, that's my little aside.
Interesting. I asked about who was running it, or who was building it, or who was using it, actually, because I read a report about all of these data centers that are being built across the United States, and how the companies that are building them, and this may be the case with Bell as well, because I was looking it up. I'm Bell is getting involved in AI. They're trying to get in business with companies that are doing AI through these data centers. So these companies are building these data centers everywhere with the anticipation that they will be needed. And many of them don't actually have an AI company to work with yet. The anticipation is that it is inevitable that they will need it. And so the report that I was listening to was people think that AI is a bubble. What really is for sure a bubble is this data center thing, which is is having such an impact on communities across the United States and North America as well. And these companies may end up having to abandon these centers that they're building, because it is unlikely, according to this report, that the demand is ever going to reach the level that it needs to fill all of the supply of data centers that all these companies are currently trying to get into.
Yeah, and I think that that's the case for this Bell facility as well, because if folks were listening to the Daily News last week, I mentioned that the people who were protesting it were demanding to know who was the AI company that they would be working with, and it wasn't clear that that decision had been made or not made yet. Now, yesterday, the regional municipality of Sherwood approved the AI data center. So there you go. The 7-member council for the rural municipality that is near Regina approved this. And the story from CBC from Katie Swires and Jeffrey Tram mentions right off the top, which I think is super important, that the council is comprised of 7 people, a minority of whom 3 were elected.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that's obviously a pretty big question about democracy and who has the right to, make decisions like this. The property that is going to have the site is owned by 7 different families. And the landowners were all asking various questions about what impact this might have on their land. And really what's probably more important is their local wells, because this is not a part of Canada that's got a ton of water, right? It's groundwater that they've got to rely on. And if we're paying attention to southern parts of the prairies, of course, drought has been a big concern. And so when you've got groundwater that's being that will potentially be eaten up by these companies, that's a big problem. That's a big problem.
Big problem.
And I'll also just mention that of the people who were not elected. So as I say, so on this regional municipality, there are 7 people. 3 were elected, 4 were not. And they were appointed by the province, and none of them are actually from the regional municipality.
Wow.
Yeah. They were appointed. So these people are Ray Orb, Mitch Huber, Donna Strudwick, and Judy Harwood, and they were elected because they had municipal experience. So they wouldn't have to have a long onboarding process. You know what? This is like a true attack on democracy, like a really stunning and clear attack on democracy.
I mean, yeah, it doesn't get any truer than that. What in the world? That's really awful. You know what else is really awful?
Oh, what?
The media in this country. I mean, I know we've talked about it before, but I just in this day and age with all this stuff that's going on, it's just becoming so blatantly clear. And there's a couple of things that I want to mention just to start us off, and then let's go broader. First, a weird small news story about that I feel like we need a little bit more information on, but there's a journalist from City TV that was fired. Her name is Tina Yazdani, and she was fired by City TV. And the thing that's weird about it, like, was not only was she fired, but they removed 2 of her stories from their website, which is a bit odd.
That's
like,
a no-no.
There was something, unless there's something untrue in the stories, and they haven't published anything as to why they have removed those stories. And she was known for holding Doug Ford and the Ford government's in Ontario's feet to the fire. So it's a bit strange, especially because like City TV is like owned by Rogers, and it's, you know, like there's a lot of media consolidation in Canada, and there's just questions as to why they would have done that. Why we're not hearing more about like why these articles are gone, but also like, you know, who's running our media and why and what's going on there. So, and one of the articles that was pulled was her coverage on Ford's budget, and so it's just a few questions about like what is going on over at City TV.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is like kind of a stunning situation. And Yazdani, like if you live in Ontario and you don't know her name, you probably have at least seen her because she really is or has been one of the journalists who's been consistently on Doug Ford, as a journalist is supposed to be. Now, she gets fired by City TV, and the news actually gets broken by a political blog. Like, not by a mainstream outlet. It gets broken by a blog called politicalcorner.ca by Ahmed El-Bayoumi. And it's not, I don't know politicalcorner.ca, but he seems to have a lot of advertisements for like municipal based stuff. So I imagine maybe that's more of his focus. And so this gets broken by this blog or this website. When I say blog in this case, I'm not being pejorative because sometimes people are like, it's just a blog. No, I mean independent website. And then the only publications to take it up, and this has happened like more than a week ago now, has been Now Toronto and Blog.to, both of which are shells of their former selves. Often when I see Blog.to, I imagine it's just like AI with a little bit of human help. And Now Toronto doesn't tend to do news like it used to anymore. But Eva Zhu at Now Toronto has a write-up on it. And that is it. That is it. And so, people are asking questions. This is a channel owned by Rogers. And, years ago when I wrote a tweet that Rogers Communications Corporation did not like, they made sure that my life was ruined. They were the owners of Maclean's at the time. And Maclean's put out its first press release like ever to condemn me for writing something that most reasonable Canadians had thought. And also, nothing I said was wrong or even, frankly, insensitive. It became insensitive in the way that it was lied about later on. So I know very, very well that Rogers has no problem getting rid of people that they find to be troublesome. I'm not saying that that's what happened in this situation because we do not know. I am saying that the second that Rogers sold Maclean's and Chatelaine and other magazines to St. Joseph's Communications, all of a sudden I was allowed to write for all of these magazines again. Very, very curious. And so, but we don't know, like, no, there's no CBC story. There's no CTV story. I mean, like the veritable competitors to Rogers are not covering why this journalist was suddenly removed from her post. And it's just demonstrating the state of cowardice and collusion and support of power that is rampant right now within the mainstream media.
It's very, very strange. Like, I would have expected at least one outlet to write, like one major news outlet to write a story about this because it's so strange, but very, very weird. The other thing that that I would bring up just to open up this discussion is the coverage of the jet purchase in Ontario, which is like hilarious. If you haven't seen it,
what?
If you
totally
haven't
hilarious.
Seen it, it's well, actually, I said I would bring up two things, but I have three things to bring up. So this is number two. If you haven't seen it, Doug Ford, the report is that he's purchased a $29 million private jet for his personal travels, and like, what the fuck? It's like, like Ontario doesn't have other problems. And then, of course, this is like the new, like one of the big news stories of the week because people are like, oh my God, he bought a plane. And he's like, I'm the most scrutinized politician in all of Canada. And it's like, what are you talking about? And then he's like, Quebec has planes. And the journalists are like, he says Quebec has planes. And he's like, fine, I'm going to sell my plane. And they're like, he's going to sell his plane, but he's still upset because Quebec has planes. And it's like, does Quebec have planes? But anyway, it's like, I mean, to report it like that without the context of what Doug Ford's government is doing with respect to decimating the public service in Canada and how there's no money for anything else, but they're going to use this money to purchase a private plane for Doug Ford's private travels. And then I saw like some independent research of whether or not there actually was a jet purchase at all, like whether there, which is like, how is somebody who's doing independent research figuring out that the journalists have somehow missed that this purchase may not have actually gone through? It's all very, very strange.
Yes. And actually, I want to go back to your point about the Quebec planes. So Quebec did purchase jets, and the jets are all medical transport. And this was first reported by Nadine Youssef, and she works for the BBC. And she wrote on Twitter that she thought it was strange that she was the only reporter just saying the Quebec jets are for medical transport. Eventually, it took a couple of days for other journalists to report the same thing. And so, like, that's weird.
It's very strange. It's almost as though Canada's media sector operates like a Facebook news feed. You know, like someone breaks a story, maybe it's the Globe and Mail, and then everybody else like just is like, oh my God, like, share with a little bit of commentary. You know what I mean? It's like, I think you have to actually like do journalism as part of this, being a journalist thing. I don't know. I didn't go to J school. Maybe you could tell us.
Yeah, like this story was originally broken by Robert Benzie, who is like, I don't know, the most credible Ontario journalist in the world. Benzie's, of course, wife works for the Ontario government, which is like, I mean, you know, I'm always curious to know what he gets to find out because of marital connections, but you know, whatever, that's the world that we live in. Stephen Watkins is, I think, probably Canada's only independent journalist at all that really, really pays attention to military stuff. And if you're military stuff in terms of like where planes are located and military planes and the industry of jets, basically. And he ripped this story apart. And he was the one to identify that it's not even clear that as you said, that these jets were even purchased at all. You know, he mentions like senior government officials who are speaking confidentially, saying that the government took possession of a 2016 Bombardier Challenger 650. And of course, Stefan's like, why would you believe any anonymous senior government official? Because all of this stuff is public. You can find out pretty easily if you've got the skills and, you know, access to different programs to figure out if this actually happened. So he takes apart, you know, like pretty much paragraph by paragraph. Benzie writes, the current government fleet is limited to Beechcraft King Air turboprops with limited range, right? And Stefan reminds everybody that saying that a King Air having limited range is completely nuts, because in the province, it absolutely can go everywhere. And what does a Challenger 650 need to actually land? A long paved runway, which not all airports in the province even have.
Yeah, not practical for Ontario.
Yeah. And so he reminds Benzie and anybody paying attention that if you want, you can look up the Canadian Civil Aircraft Register. You can look up every single plane that starts with C, and you can figure out where things are, who purchased them, who the owner is. And he does this. He goes right through this and finds the plane in jet photos. You could see that it was most recently, the plane was actually photographed at the airport in Montreal just from a few weeks ago, and was registered to an American trustee intermediary, which is normal, he says. And then he goes through this and is able to identify that the plane that was purchased was likely a plane that had passed through Brazil, Mexico, landed at Pearson. It really wasn't very hard. And he tracked down all of the registrations that this plane has had. First built as CFUAO in 2015, and then registered in Mexico, the United States, Brazil, Mexico, and then again registered in April on as CFBBW, if you want to look that up. And so, you know, again, as you point out, there's just no rigor. And this is supposed to be the guy who does Canadian political reporting. But of course, this is not just isolated to the Toronto Star. The quality of journalism that we're getting these days is embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Like, have you seen all of the reporting around the gas tax stuff?
I have not been paying attention to the gas tax stuff. Tell me.
They'll do it for a day or 3 days, and then they'll incrementally increase it, and then it'll go back up because the Strait of Hormuz is still not open. Like, it's so ridiculous. And I was listening to CBC Radio because I landed in Toronto, and I made a TikTok about this, so forgive me if you checked out the TikTok, but CBC Radio's Drive Home Show host, Farah Morali, was talking to some guy who was like presented as if he was a journalist. And she's like, so this gas tax holiday, what do we think of it? And he's like, oh, it's great. It's really good. Yes, it's good. And then he proceeds to explain basically how it actually is not going to do anything, but all framed around this is really good. And I'm like, wait a minute. Everything you're saying is nothing, but I'm supposed to say this is good. Okay. And then she's like, well, talk to us about vehicles. Like, which vehicles should people purchase right now? Electric vehicles, gas vehicles. And the guy's like, well, I went to ChatGPT and I asked them this question. And, you know, it's, yeah. And you know, of course, ChatGPT can be fraught, but blah, blah. Oh, yeah. And CBC's airing this as if it's journalism, as if there aren't auto industry experts and analysts and auto industry journalists out there who can tell you these things. No. We're not going to support journalism in this country, whether that journalism is military aircraft journalism or it's auto industry journalism or it's basic normal person journalism where you're actually just doing the work yourself. No, CBC is going to outsource it to some guy who actually ends up being the president of a credit counseling company anyway, not even a journalist, to tell me that actually my next purchase shouldn't be a hybrid because that's not going to save me as much money as an electric vehicle. I should get an electric vehicle. And also this gas tax stuff is really, really good news. And so there's like never a frame, like, why is the government not seizing the profits that are being skimmed off of this international crisis? Why is the government not setting price caps? Why are journalists just reporting? Like, Air Canada just announced that they're afraid of jet fuel shortages and therefore they're going to cut their one of their hundreds of
flight routes to
routes?
Yeah, flight routes to Newark from Toronto, I think it was.
From JFK specifically, I think, to Toronto. And it's like that we're supposed to believe that's because of a jet fuel shortage, even though we produce our own jet fuel.
Yeah,
I mean, come on. Like, I am worried about this.
Yeah, it's not good. I will say, like, on this particular story too, did you see the Power and Politics that Avi Lewis did?
I did, yes. And I've seen him on a couple of other things too.
Yeah, well, they spoke about this issue in particular, and I thought it was like really striking how the CBC decided to position themselves opposite Avi Lewis. It seemed really clear to me that they wanted to position him as someone who didn't understand the gas tax issue at all. Like, it seemed like what they were trying to do was to try to catch him on not understanding the way that the economics worked around it. But he was very good. I mean, like, the stuff that he was saying was all the questions essentially that you just asked, and very clearly laying it out about why it wouldn't work, why just a cancellation of the gas tax wouldn't work, and what needed to happen instead. And it was just so weird, but also par for the course, because that's how the CBC generally positions itself with respect to the NDP. But I was just like, this is really strange. Like, instead of trying to have a gotcha moment, we could have like an actual journalistic moment about, like, why is it that the NDP believes this rather than what all the other parties believe about what needs to happen.
Well, actually, okay, so I didn't see that. And how could they have positioned him as being incorrect? Like, what on earth were they saying? That, like, we are going to get this money back? Like, how could CBC have even justified this when there's no guarantees at all that we would ever see any savings from a gas tax rebate or relief or holiday or whatever the hell they're calling it?
Well, so Avi Lewis, was relying on the one of the reports from the CCPA or something from Jim Stanford in particular, who he cited in what he was talking about. And David Cochrane is like, okay, yeah, but that's essentially, he's like, that's not how it works. This is like international, like it's part of an international market, like it's international. The price of gas and oil is internationally set. And Avi Lewis is talking about how, like, these are decisions that governments make, and some of the decisions that we can make are price caps, are taxes that go directly to the corporation rather than to individuals at the pump, and like what we need to do at a time of when there is going to be an oil shock, but Canada still remains one of the largest producers of oil in the world. And then he's like, okay, but it seems like you like, do you understand that the prices are set internationally? Like, just kept harping on that point.
Wow.
And it's a pretty interesting. Avi Lewis does very well. It's a pretty interesting interview for those of you who want to take a look at it, and just a really clear example of how the media can just be the right hand of the people in power who want us to believe that it can't be any other way.
Yeah. Yeah, well, especially because, like, you know, Stanford is no slouch. And that's precisely why he, I imagine, is recommending increased taxes. Because if it is too complicated to pull Canada's energy supply out of the international pricing scheme, then the obvious instrument that you can pull or use is taxation. Like, that is obvious and extremely obvious. But, you know, again, as you say, like, this is the only reason apparently for media to exist these days is to put forward the most boring, bootlicking, government supporting stuff forward. And I just want to mention another thing that I thought was fascinating, a tweet from Mary Newman, who is a journalist and was at the CBC for quite a while, and then like couldn't take it anymore, couldn't take how bad their coverage was on Palestine, and quit, and then wrote about her experiences within the corporation. So she posted this week online. She retweeted Trita Parsi, who is an Iranian analyst and, you know, is not necessarily putting forward the line of the West when it comes to Iran. And he was posting about Mahsa Ahmadinejad. Mahsa Ahmadinejad is the woman who wears a flower in her hair. Do you know that person who's always talking about like bombing Iran?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Trita writes, a few Iranian American voices have been as supportive as bombing Iran or as aggressive in defaming opponents of war as Mahsa Ahmadinejad. But now that it's clear that the war has been a disaster, Ahmadinejad predictably backtracks and tries to portray herself as the victim. But her contemptible role will not be forgotten. She betrayed two peoples here, the Iranian people whose blood is on her hands and the American people whose military she treated as her private mercenary army. Okay, so Mary retweets this and writes, when I worked at CBC, seniors rejected my pitch to interview genocide scholars on Gaza and forced me to produce an interview with Ahmadinejad on how the West should support regime change in Iran. I also pitched an interview with Trita Parsi on the woman life freedom protests, but was told that he was a quote unquote regime puppet.
Wow.
Isn't that
Wow,
fascinating?
it's like it's so strange. Like, who is deciding like what the Canadian line will be on these stories? I think it's so weird that it really is. It's operating almost algorithmically. Even though there's no algorithm controlling it, you know?
Yeah.
The final story that I wanted to bring up is one that you already brought up in this episode, but it's worth spending a little time here, is the Canada Post stories.
Yep.
Do all the headlines just say that Canada Post has lost, what is it? Let me see.
It's 1.56 billion.
It feels like all the headlines are that Canada Post has lost 1.57 or 6, depending on what you're looking at, billion in 2025, which is like, Canada Post and Cup W are going into negotiations again for a new collective agreement. This certainly feels like a management line, but also, is this not a public service? Like, I'm just very confused about the framing of this being all as though we're reporting on a publicly traded company that is what, posting a loss for its shareholders. Sorry, like, do we remember what Canada looks like and what time we're in right now, and how one gets physical mail and packages across a country like Canada? I mean, that's going to take some investment. And I mean, that's what public services are for. And why are we treating this like a loss? A loss? Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you were to look up Canada Post on Google News search, you're right. Every single headline is virtually the same. I have CBC, Global News, CP24, Toronto Star, CTV, Global, Times Colonist, Castanet, CHCH, NTV News, CBC, The Globe and Mail. And then for some reason, when I go to next, Google's like, sorry, that's it. As if there's no other stories about Canada Post to pull up, which is another thing. Google's increasingly shitty search function is driving me insane. Anyway, now
it is so frustrating.
It's so frustrating. Yeah. Now, part of this, of course, is that they're taking copy from the Canadian press, but only some of it, because like the first article that I opened is not a Canadian press story. It's a CBC story. And the funny thing about CBC writing about this, so, you know, the Canada Post has been operating as a corporation since the 1980s, but it is a crown corporation. So there are no shareholders. The money goes back to the federal government. Now, for many, many years, it was profitable. And so the government made money off of Canada Post. In the last 8 years, it has been not profitable, and so Canada has to subsidize the loss at Canada Post's Crown Corporation. I think it is so fascinating that the CBC is going to take the frame of Canada Post reports record loss of $1.57 billion in 2025 when the CBC is also a Crown Corporation. And do you know how much money the federal government gives CBC every year?
I'm willing to bet it's also in the billions. Tell me.
Yeah, it's 1.7 billion. So like on the full, like the CBC makes money, it makes advertising money, it sells rights, it sells shows. So it's a business, and the federal government still subsidizes it to the tune of $1.7 billion, which if this article by Marina von Stackelberg at the CBC was writing about itself would have a headline, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation reports record loss of $1.7 billion, because that's what has to be paid into it by the federal government to make it viable, because public broadcasting, not done for profit, that's trying to reach all parts of Canada in 2 languages across multiple platforms, isn't exactly profitable. But no, as you say, we get this, or we get the innovation from the Toronto Star, which I love. Canada Post, it has a no profits of $6.1 billion if we add up the last 8 years together.
But it's also like, I mean, there's been this idea that like Canada Post needs to be self-sustaining. It's like, okay, sure. That's something that the government has decided. Well, maybe it's time for a new orientation around that. But also there's been ideas for years directly from the workers as to how to make Canada Post to make sure that Canada Post is like increasing its revenues through things like that would benefit Canadians, like postal banking and so on, that the government has not engaged in, or the management at the Crown Corporation has not engaged in. And also it's like they've increasingly let Amazon come into Canada and take a huge share of what Canada Post is doing, to let it whittle down what Canada Post is supposed to provide for Canadians. There's a number of other private companies in the delivery space. If Canada wants to protect Canada Post, which it should, it could put some regulations around this stuff to make sure that Canada Post it doesn't have that kind of competition, but it hasn't. And anyway, like what's important about that is it's like, shouldn't we at least hear about that in the reporting of what's going on?
Well, and it's also kind of like more wild than that. And you said that there was still negotiations happening. There are still kind of negotiations happening, but there's actually a deal that the workers are voting on now. So that's why this is hit now. So you had last week the announcement that they would stop delivering to 4 million addresses, and then this week these losses, all to put pressure on the workers to accept a contract that their leadership is divided on, which is a really important piece of information. But also, I was also reminded by a friend of mine that, like, you know, Canada Post is a user fee service, right? We pay to send letter mail out. And if you compare Canada Post's rates to rates in other comparable countries, our rates have risen by 7%, where their rates have risen by 55%. Now, we can look at that and say that's good because it's still cheaper to send mail, to send letter mail or send packages. And that's a positive thing. So this isn't a loss. It's actually subsidizing a service. That would be one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is that Canada Post has not raised its rates to actually meet the amount of money it should raise to operate as a break-even corporation. Right? So regardless of how you cut that, this is a fault of Canada Post management, or it's something that actually we should take pride in, that we have a cheaper mail service than in comparable countries. But none of that is the frame of this is a failure, we need to privatize it, we need to sell it off. And of course, that is not mentioned in any of the articles. The articles are very, very, very narrowly focused on the fact that there is a vote for the workers. It's also, does mention that, of course, Canada Post's private courier service, Purelator, has posted a big amount of profits, $250 million in profits. And so then, it's weird that they have a private courier so that they actually compete against themselves. But then if they're getting profits from Purelator, then that seems like all good, right? Why would the Crown Corporation own a private company? That's a good question. But no, journalists are not equipped to have any of these kinds of conversations. It has to be exactly the line that you are expected to have. And if you get too critical, then you risk losing your job.
So, okay, you went to J school. What does this all mean? Like, why are we in the spot that we're in this state of Canadian media right now? Is the investigation that the Heritage Committee is currently doing on the state of Canadian media going to do anything about this? Going to make any sort of difference? And what's coming for the future, do you think?
Sorry, you mean the committee that just had Honest Reporting present as a witness?
That's the one.
Yeah. So, I think that that's actually fascinating because Honest Reporting is an organization that literally only exists to harass people out of being critical of Israel. And they've come after any single journalist that writes anything critical about Israel. So when I wrote an article for The Walrus about counting deaths in Gaza, they came after me as being a propagandist. And it's just like, eat shit and fuck off. Like that's my only message to Honest Reporting. They're a joke of an organization, and they're trying to scare important media people, whether that's media owners, whether that's editors, whether that's publishers, out of covering Israel critically. And I think that they're a really good sign of the times right now, not just the times of, Israel doing genocide and people reacting to that, but also the sign of the times of the state of media. Because nothing that we've described in this episode is what you would learn in J school on how to actually do journalism. But it is what happens when you're in an industry that is on its last ropes, absolutely sucks. It's struggling for its life. The organizations that have figured out how to actually make money off of this, small amounts of money off of this, are still infected by the same logic of absolutely support the status quo, the reigning logic of the state, regardless of whoever's in power, and all this is going to continue to do is get worse because people cannot stand working in these places. And so if you are still working in these places, it's either because you haven't written or you don't normally write something that threatens them, which is not an insult. You might be in a different kind of journalism. That's fine. Or you have and you're out. And so the people that are still working there are the ones that, have made the cut, are the ones that are allowed to say certain things. That creates its own culture around what is allowed and what is correct and how journalism should be practiced, even if it's completely grotesque from the perspective of 20 or 30 or 50 years ago. And it's not going to get better. This is why people have tuned out. This is why Sandy Nora exists. This is why people get their news from TikTok. And the problem is that, we don't replace mass media. We're not mass media. We can't be mass media. And we'll all be worse off for it. But there's nothing to save because the people making the decisions don't want it to be saved. They're actually happy with the state of things as they are right now because they control some level of public opinion, and it's not going to cause too many waves among their overlords, which are the shareholders, their corporate owners, or the state.